Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Good afternoon, our chairman, secretary, and guest speaker, and subject matter expert, and all our guests in Nigeria. All protocol duly observed. My name is Ismail Olameji Sikiru, and I'm your host for today's PEEF Virtual Talk PVT series. And this is the fifth in our series in 2024, and one of the two that is scheduled around energy value chain. The next one will be coming up maybe sometimes later this month, and that will be dealing with the downstream sector. Whereas this is mainly focused on the upstream sector, as you can see from the topic. Today's topic is value creation in Nigeria oil and gas upstream industry, prospect and challenges, and is very relevant to what is really happening in our nation at the moment, because we can all feel the biting of the high oil fuel price, which also stems from the oil production itself, which is our main value driver here. And the topic will cover the historical context of oil and gas business value sources, the current state of the industry, challenges, and finally, the speaker will propose some recommendation to improve the values for Nigerian entity. A little about PEEF. The PEEF is People Excellence and Expertise Foundation, and it's a not-for-profit organization comprising of reputable and experienced professionals proffering practical solutions to skills management challenges in Nigeria and Africa at large. The vision of the organization is to be the leader and most respected organization championing skill development in Nigeria, with a mission to increase skill proficiency and produce work within African workforce. And our main core values are professionalism, integrity, sincerity, productivity, and excellence. You can find more details about, for those who don't know about PEEF, who are just joining, you can find more details on our website, which is www.pewef.ng. So I'm going to probably say a little about our guest speaker before I hand over to our chairman, board of trustee, to say something about the process. So our speaker, Engr Bashir, actually is a graduate of mechanical engineering with over 32 years experience in the energy industry. He started his career as research assistant in renewable energy with Sokoto Energy Research Center, focusing on solar power and biomass. He then joined the NNPC Port Harcourt Refinery Company Limited, where he worked as planning and cost engineer, involved in planning and execution of refinery turnaround maintenance. Engr Bashir joined the Shell Petroleum Development Company, SPDC Limited, in 1996. And over the next 27 years, worked in technical roles in maintenance engineering, project development and execution, asset integrity management, in executive management position in asset management and corporate governance. He retired in June last year as Director and General Manager, Business and Government Relations, SPDC Limited. Engr Bashir has passion for community service, and his hobbies include traveling and reading history and current affairs. He is married with children. I will now call on our Chairman BOT, Engineer Abdullahi Boka, to give a goodwill remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our host. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this talk, one of our series where we try to enlighten members on key topics that impact not only on the country, but also for the industry. And like our host has said, I don't believe there's any more topic more important in the country now for the economy than to talk about value creation in the oil and gas industry. I'm sure many of you have heard the Minister for Oil make some remarks which the press are ridiculous. All right, let's not get into the figures, but the important thing that there's a need for people in our country, in the industry, and among the policymakers to understand how value creation works, how best it can be done, how best it can be fostered and made part and parcel of the policy. And you listen to the technical people who will make the decisions and let the execution be with them, and let the policy makers, having understood what needs to be done, make the policies and then really just become monitors so that we can deliver and get going. I have to tell you one very simple story. About 12 years ago, I think, we had this same argument. Nigeria's oil and gas production were falling from the height they were around 2012. And you try to make people understand this, and they need to do so. That same position is being replicated now. I think Shell alone now is doing only about 170. When actually Shell in those years could do well over 1 million. Yeah. When I left Shell in 2007, we had the capacity to produce 1.2 million from the JV assets and about 360,000 from Bonga and the Sea Eagle. So I could easily say Shell could do 1.5 million, which is approximately what Nigeria is doing. And at that time, the LNG was satisfying all their orders and also selling spot cargoes. But now I think we're in a position where it will be a very good day when we do 1.3, 1.4. It will also be a very good day when we have got about 55 to 60% of what the Bonny LNG can process hitting their plant. So we are in dire need of doing something, and the best way to understand the economic impact of what we're doing, which is to make us have better quality of life, than to actually raise the economic activity and fund it through what we make through our resources so that we can ensure sustainable development for the country in the future years with all the environmental and population growth issues. So I'll leave it to the expert to lead us through. And I thank all of you for finding time to attend. And also, let's listen. Let's also come out with questions and also to help you along. And above all, let's make sure what we hear, we imbibe, and we also disseminate it, and we get more people to join the PEEF. So thank you very much, and over to you, our host.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you for your words of advice. Before I call on the guest speaker, I would like to probably just mention the common ground rule. For this presentation, we would like the guest speaker to actually go uninterrupted for the next 30 minutes so that he can disseminate all that he wants to tell us. And after that, you can, maybe during that process, if you have any key burning question, you can note it down in the chat session. And after the session, after this presentation, I'll call on individuals to, by raising your hand, you can indicate by raising your hand, and I'll call on you to probably ask a question as required. And if you have comments, you can also indicate that, and then we can also run that through if we have enough time. Now I'm going to share the slide submitted by the guest speaker, and I'll call on Engineer Bashir Bello to present for us. So hold on a second.
Thank you, Alhaji Sikiru, and thank you to the management of PEEF for the opportunity. And I wanted to say I did had the chairman talking about calling on the expert to speak, and my first confession was to say I have no idea why the executive secretary in his wisdom fished me out of all the our phobias and the veterans in the industry to speak on such a complicated and difficult topic. I said to myself, maybe he didn't want me to forget what I have been learning, because since I left last year, I essentially have tried to keep myself and rest after almost 30 years of high pressure kind of work. So maybe it's a reminder that I shouldn't forget what I've been doing. I recall when I retired last year, a senior official from government called and was begging me that he hoped I'm not going to farming. And he cited an example of one senior executive in NNPC that retired and decided to go and open a farm. And he said he hoped I'm not taking all my experience and knowledge into farm. And given the question of what we're having now, I think it could have been revolutionary anyway, because we certainly need to address our productive capacity, especially in terms of being able to feed ourselves. Like you said, thank you so much. The topic you have given me to talk is quite wide-ranging, diverse, complicated, perhaps even I would say controversial, given the state of affairs in Nigeria and where we find ourselves. You've alluded to the issue of availability of PMS or fuel, but you can extend it to energy availability across the nation, whether it is PMS or indeed electricity. We have been described as a resource-rich nation, but with energy poverty. So perhaps I think there are some that their mic are on, if we can all mute so that noise will reduce. Thank you. Resource-rich nation, but suffering energy poverty. I think that's the task before all of us, especially with the way PEEF is organized and spearheading what we could do collectively to change the narrative. Mr. Ibe, if you can mute your microphone, please. A bit of noise is coming. Thank you. So like the host had outlined, what is showing is exactly how I want to take us through the discussion. I know is given the diversity of the topic, is extremely difficult to say we can talk about it within an hour. Talk less of giving me 30 minutes to talk about it, but I will try. What I wanted to do was essentially to tease up discussion, set up an agenda that will further invite more discussion and perhaps maybe subsequent presentation to see how we can indeed find good collective approach to change our like I said, and I don't think also anything I would say here would be new, especially to the veterans of the industry. But the fact that we still continue to restate them is a statement around how we have not moved. We have not really moved towards a resolution of the issue as a nation. But I hope as we continue to recycle this discussion, we will find good ideas and see how best to take our nation going forward. We can just move to the next slide. Can you help me shift to the next slide? Okay, thank you. So this is just to put a bit of context where we're coming from. Our nation, Nigeria, currently 220 million. If you look at the World Bank say about 223 million, growing at a rate, Mr. AB, I think your mic, sorry, growing at the rate of 2.4 annual growth, with the GDP growth that is hovering anywhere between 2 to 3. It's struggle if we don't double our GDP growth, that our population growth will overtake our economic activity, and the current pressure we are seeing as a nation can only get bad. Even more so because at 220 million, we can on the 220 million mouths. That's the focus. We fit 1 million. but we're not looking at the 440 hands alone. That's what we need to focus on. Those are the things that we really need to see. We got 440 hands and legs that we need to work and collectively improve our productive capacity. Then it will be easier for us to address the 220 million mouth, or indeed the 400 million mouth that is projected to be Nigeria's population around 2050, where Nigeria is projected to be the fourth largest country in terms of population. So indeed, the task before Nigeria and before us is a significant one, and we need to work assiduously to address that. Our estimated oil reserve, 37 billion, 37 to 40, is a bit of part of the controversy. Colleagues have said, but we have been mentioning this number over several years, despite all the production. Are we sure? So this is the number that the regulator has. Even if you look at the NEPRC 2023 report, you will see is around 37 billion. And there are indeed a bit of exploration work that has been going on. And there's also a bit of seismic reason why the value had remained where it is, despite all the production. But I also see that has fallen shortened around our target. I mean, since the Vision 2010, the subsequent planning by government, our aspiration by now should have been to grow to about 40 billion. Our expectation would have been to be producing 4 million barrels a day, but we are still lagging behind. We are not even producing at our capacity at we'll see. We are still hovering 1.3, 1.5 over the last 4 or 5 years. Our production has suffered significantly, like we see. In terms of gas, we have significant gas reserves. 280 TCF is what is advertised by the regulator as known reserves for gas. Expectation that this is much higher, above 600 TCF. Nigeria has been described as actually a province with oil reserves. So essentially, we are a gas province, and most of this gas is gas discovered accidentally as a result of looking for oil. So if we actually actively go looking for gas, we probably can be much more than that. And whereas the oil is where the money of today is, gas is where our ability to industrialize and actually expand our domestic economy lies. So we are sitting on significant potential to change the narrative of our nation in terms of providing the energy that we need as a nation, but also in terms of the industrialization we need, including boosting agriculture that you could do through fertilizer production, like we'll come to see. Our production capacity, you say, is given the integrated production system in Nigeria now and the significant asset degradation that has occurred across the board. You can see if we do everything we can today, we probably can get 2.2 million barrels. Capacity from quality to all of the production facilities. So, but we are struggling. Currently, when I look at the NEPRC website, I think the current production is around 1.5. On average, it's been hovering between 1.3, 1.5 beginning of the year. Last year, the NEPRC report suggested we produced 1.5 million average last year. So you can see that even though when this government came in, there was a target that by 2024, we should jack up production to 1.8. With all the concerted effort today, we are still hovering at 1.5, significantly below our capacity and below our potential. So we have all the reserves, but we are still struggling to monetize. We are still struggling to maximize the value that we can generate from there. Oil and gas GDP currently trailing below 7%. But oil and gas still remain the highest export for Nigeria. We depend on it entirely on foreign exchange, and I think that is significantly the area that we became so lax. Once oil came and foreign revenue started coming, everything else did not matter. We became so hooked and addicted to oil, and today we are still dependent. About 90% of our foreign earning is coming from oil, despite the potential that exists elsewhere, whether in agriculture, or in services, or in other industrialization efforts. The oil and gas still constitutes 60% of the federal government revenue, and no wonder, because the revenue is seriously challenged. Can still not afford finances except from the parties. We still do have frontier business that with the PIA and what government is pushing to see, can we extend the frontier of our exploration to add more reserves to achieve the objective of the 40 million reserves or more. So we have these frontier basins across the country from the and then the deep, ultra deep water. So essentially, that's the story of our industry and where it resides. If you can go to the next slide, please. So historical perspective, again, the next slide, essentially what I wanted to show is that it hasn't shown, maybe it's the network that is coming, is essentially to show that the relationship between agric and oil and gas. From the very beginning in the early 60s and the late 1950s when oil and gas came, the GDP contribution was less than 1%. But like I said, as a nation, once we discover the easy money that comes from books and everything else does not matter. So agriculture significantly declined. If there was any side gas has impacted the Nigerian economy, it's the profound impact on agriculture, such that decline currently around 50%. Also, from oil was achieved and currently is also trailing behind 7%, way behind the services sector, which is now leading in terms of GDP contribution, 58%. And yet the irony is that despite the reduced contribution to GDP, we are oil and gas for our revenue, especially and predicament. We are a consumer nation, really a consumer nation, but consumer of export or import products. So today that almost all our export earning from oil is also going to supply consumption for especially PMS, everybody is struggling. The government is struggling. There is no more money to satisfy our export consumptive urge, and then we are all suffering. Government is cap in hand borrowing, and everybody is struggling. The naira will not stabilize, and the fuel price will not come down, and we are all struggling as to why. I think we have actually eaten our chances in the former year. Now is the time to roll up our sleeve, remember our 440 hands and 440 legs, and really step up our production capacity, not only in the oil and gas itself, but across the industry and services we need before we can actually turn the tide. If you look at the services sector, where I said is 58% contribution, significantly that is telecoms. And two of the most successful companies in telecoms today are not even Nigerian companies. So across the board where you live, we need to ask ourselves as Nigerians, what do we need to do to change the trend, to change the narrative? Otherwise, the difficulty we are in today, the difficulty we are seeing today will only get worse if something is not done. On the right side, what you see is exactly the issue about export. Export has remained, our dependency on oil has remained like that. Almost the data you see there is up to 2010 from CBN. I couldn't get the data to current moment, but at the moment it's still about 90%. Instead of the 98% you see, we are still dependent almost 90% on oil and gas for our export revenue. So it is demanding for an urgent action for a change. Now let's go to the meat of the presentation so that we can discuss a little bit around what is this value, how is it created, what are the leverages that we have, or what can change. So what I wanted to do was just take a step to provide some introductory slides, especially for those of us who are not the veterans in the industry, to understand what are the various elements in the industry, especially the upstream industry, and how do we create value, and how is this value shared. So I said, essentially, the upstream has several value streams. The primary one, like I said, is revenue earning, right? Since we found crude oil one of the most important products across the world, if you have it, the price is dictated not by the cost you actually produce it, but essentially by the demand in the market, you get revenue. And since we found that, we have never looked back in terms of focusing on oil and gas for our revenue. So the major value stream here is revenue generation, especially in foreign exchange. Now, for us in Nigeria, it also gives us an opportunity for employment of our people, but also human capacity development. I think if we over the last 50 or 60 years since the commencement of the industry has tried significantly in actually developing the capacity of our people. You see it now across the board. People whether in technology or elsewhere, who had background in oil industry are actually leading. So we have had that benefit as a nation. It's also part of it that we get a bit of technology transfer. Now, that has helped significantly in how we continue to produce oil and gas, but I'm not sure we have also harnessed it very well and say, how do we transfer that technology outside of the oil and gas industry itself to elsewhere where it can benefit the nation? But that remains to be tapped as a value. On the secondary stream value, of course, there would have been significant value addition if we also had a vibrant mid and downstream sector. And not to say that we have not tried. In the early 70s, where the creation of NNPC, refineries were built, significant pipeline product infrastructure with depots were built across the nation. And I think this began to show in the early 80s, but unfortunately over time, this has also lapsed and we are struggling. I would say that probably the most successful addition that we have made is in the gas sector, where we built energy, and it ran extremely well over the last 15 or 20 years, until also recently, as a result of the difficulties in the upstream, that sector is also suffering. As you could, now I didn't focus on it because our focus today is upstream, but you could see that in the last 5 to 6 years, the LNG plant has been running almost at between 30 to 40% empty as a result of issues in the upstream sector. We cannot even produce the gas that is required. And this is an industry that has an annual turnover of anywhere between $5 to $6 billion that can put anywhere between $2 to $3 billion on the table of government. That is also suffering as a result of the issues in the upstream sector. So in terms of secondary stream, I think as a nation, we have not also done very well in terms of value addition through creation of a vibrant midstream. Of course, we have seen with the renewed effort to bring in private parties into the midstream, creation of refineries, we have, after a lot of struggle, have pride ourselves to say we have one of the biggest refinery in the world built. Now, just coming into operation, of course, is also coming with some controversy, not the least out of perhaps the issues that are also rooted in the upstream itself. Now, with upstream as well, we have an opportunity for value through expanded economic activity, because the oil and gas industry is technology driven. It requires continuous investment. It requires a lot of work to be done in executing projects. So that alone generates anywhere between 4 to 5, perhaps even $10 billion worthy of work every year in terms of keeping the operations going, in terms of building new projects. Now, how have we been able to benefit from that? I think is one of the objectives of setting up the NOGIC Act to ensure that a lot of these supply and services are domiciled in Nigeria. But given the wider context of poor infrastructure in the nation, whether it is power, whether it is road, whether it is logistics, we have not been able to attract investment from vendors who should come and set up in country and be manufacturing stuff that could be used for the oil and gas industry. So that, despite all the best of effort, we are still dependent in importing everything that requires steel to be made. And yet there is hardly anything that does not require steel or some form of in terms of executing or providing facilities in the oil and gas industry. In the tertiary stream, you can imagine if we had boosted our activities in the gas sector, we could have massively produced fertilizer. Nigeria would have no need at all to import fertilizer, given what we have. And that could essentially have direct impact on our agricultural production. So that's something that is also left to be drawn as a value source from the oil and gas sector, which is waiting to be tapped. There are linkages to other elements of the industry like power and transportation, even telecoms. I can say that my experience shows that in the early 80s, NNPC had one of the largest telecom structure in Nigeria. I recall my company Shell at some point was even thinking of latching onto the NNPC telecom structure in Nigeria for our own telecom services. But unfortunately, what do you have today? That has gone. That is no longer the case. That is no longer the case. We can't. We have lost out in that. But those are the kind of opportunity you have that within the industry could have linked to other wider industry, our ability, given the technology, given this, to have expanded our economy. Let's go to the next page, please. Next slide. So what is the relationship with government and industry? That's what I wanted to show in this slide. So government, when it comes to oil and gas industry, is the resource holder. The resources under the ground belongs to Nigeria. It is the federation or the federal government hold it in custody for the Nigerian nation. So it is the owner and the holder of the resource. And because of that, it's entitled to collect rent. is entitled to collect royalty and certainly to collect taxes. So that's one element of relationship between government and industry. On the second one, government is also the regulator. It also provides the enabling environment for the investment. It does that by setting the rules. It also does that by issuing regulation and monitoring for compliance. So that's one other element through which government relates with the industry. The third one is that in most cases also government is a business partner. Multiple other indigenous companies today, or you'd go through the contracts, which is the production sharing contracts. Even in those ones, government is also a participant. So you can see these three elements through which government relates with industry. Government has an all-pervading influence and participation. Now, this is so that it provides the enabling environment, so that it creates the right women and provide all the enablers that is required to actually run industry successfully. But unfortunately, the flip side is also that participation of government means government bureaucracy, inefficiencies, and unfortunately, our own case, impunity and corruption will also become an obstacle in the way the industry runs, which is perhaps explains some of the issues and the problems that we currently face as a nation. Go to the next slide, please. So again, still explaining how this value is created. Essentially, what I wanted to show here is, so what is the business framework? How do we run the business, essentially? Like I mentioned, like I showed in the previous slide, government participate in either JV or PSC, or indeed there are sole risk concessions that are given to parties. Now in JV, you actually have partners coming together, and in all the JVs, you also government also participate as a partner through NNPC. And then you also, and where they do that, you can see that government earn royalty and taxes, which is the basic as a resource holder, and then government also take a share of the equity because it contributes a share of cost in terms of what is required to produce, but it also take benefit in terms of taking the share of whatever is coming as an income. You have the PSC where the government hold the concession in hand, and in each case, as it is a representative, and then it award the right to a contractor, give the right of the petroleum operation to a contractor who goes in there, takes the risk, look for the oil in terms of exploration, develop it, produce it, and when you produce it, again, government will take royalty and tax, and then the profit is then shared according to some sharing formula as will be provided under either the PSC agreement or indeed the laws governing such arrangement, which is currently PIA. Then you also have the sole risk, whereby a party will get a concession and you go ahead and spend your money, produce it. And when you do that, you only pay government royalty and taxes. Whatever benefit you get is your own. So in the first one, you see that government has to provide funding because it is a partner in the business through the NNPC. In the second one is PSC, government does not provide any funding. All it does is that it holds the license, is the owner of the license, and it grants permission to a contractor for the petroleum operations, and then wait back. When the contractor is successful, it wait back to take a share of the profit after taking the necessary royalty and taxes as provided by law. And in the sole risk as well, government provide no funding, but at the same time also will collect royalty and taxes. Next page, next slide. Sorry, there seems to be some network delay in. But show that how is the barrels fleet? So when I use 1 barrel, how do you share it among parties? What percentage goes to each party? So this is a typical JB assumption. Say, for example, we spend $20 to produce 1 barrel of oil. And if we produce 1 barrel of oil, the current arrangement under recognizes a differentiating value in terms of royalty you pay. There is a base royalty you pay if you have an onshore JV arrangement, and then there is a variation due to price. No, I think you have gone to PSC, right? Or still in the JV? Okay, so if you have oil price at below $50, you pay a certain percentage of royalty. If the oil price goes up to 75, you pay at a different percentage of royalty. If the oil price goes to $100, you pay a different percentage. If it goes above 100 up to 150, you also pay a different percentage. So you can see that the more the price, the better government gets its share. So in a less than $50 world, for example, government share is about 52%. And the government share includes all the royalty it will take, the tax it will take, and the share that goes to NNPC. Now, in the past, where you have the NNPC corporation, that amount essentially goes to the federation account. But now that you have the PIA with NNPC as a limited liability company, NNPC will retain its own share of the profit or of equity, but will only pay dividend to government based on the overall performance of NNPC as a company. So you can see that what will directly go to government currently is the royalty plus tax. And then they have to wait until when NNPC can declare a dividend before they will know whether they will get a share from their JV or not. Unlike in the past, under the corporation where whatever comes to NNPC is supposed to be a pass-through back to government. And then whatever NNPC needs for its own cost of operation, it also goes to government to collect. So if the price goes to $75, for example, the government share rises to about 64%. And if it goes to 100, it goes up to 70%. If the price were to go to above 100, government share can easily go up to 80%. So in terms of JV, you can see that the significant proportion of value generated actually goes to government. However, this is on the condition that NNPC fund 100% of its own share in the JV. And for those of us who have been in the industry, know that this has been a significant challenge over the last several years. In 2015, the administration of Buhari tried to extricate NNPC out of the difficulty in terms of JV funding. So we had this agreement across board where government agreed to liquidate all the liabilities by going into agreement with operators such that they will produce an incremental oil out of which be paid their money. And the action then was also going to be going to federation account for budget, will be able to utilize whatever proceeds they gain from their JV to be able to pay their funding. But unfortunately, that has not also helped. Between that 2015 and now, liability in terms of cash call funding has crept in, simply because NNPC is, like I will show subsequently, is shouldered letter of responsibility, is always cash strapped, is not able to meet its obligation in terms of JV cash call funding. So the pass you see here that would have gone to government is not what is going to government today, simply because government is not able to keep to its own obligation of funding its own JV 100%. I know for a fact, for example, in the company where I worked for a long time, we had instituted alternative funding, where certain elements of activities are funded by whether it's funded by LNG, is funded by other banks, incremental oil production, simply because cannot afford to fund the activities or funding which is as JV-based activities. And then if you have incremental activities that are funding, you essentially go and borrow money to provide. That essentially means that the government take has been significantly degraded by those arrangements. If you go to next slide, whereby government is not money, but is still entitled to also collect tax and also share of the profit oil, you will see that the share of government take significantly reduced. So also assuming a cost of $20 per barrel, and also assuming a mature PSC, because in the PSC range, the royalty is graduated, looks like it's graduated in what I explained previously, but also the share of oil is also depending on the maturity of the PSC. If you have a brand new PSC where the contractor has started producing oil, where he's expected to inject money to for the oil and produce it, the profit share of government is significantly low at that point. It gives an opportunity for the investor to recover his money early. So for the first few years of operation, the share of profit that goes to contractor is much higher. But where you are able to produce in certain field to certain amount, like in this case now, I'm giving an example on a field, a PSC where a field has produced up to 750 million barrels of oil. Now, in that kind of scenario, the profit share of government is up to 40%. So if we were taking that as an example to show how the barrel in that kind of field splits, this is what you have. Again, going by the graduated royalty, for an oil price of $50 or less, government take will be about 37%. And for an oil price of $75, government take can go up to 45%. And for an oil price of $100, government take can be up to 50% or more. Now you can say that government is earning more in the JV than it is in the PSC, but the issue then is that the government has to provide money in the JV. Here is essentially money without contributing anything. And also this is an ideal case where you do not have waivers or some tax arrangement that have been granted to the operator. This is assuming that no tax waiver, no incentive that has been allowed. But where there are incentives such as production levels or some other, the government will also be slightly less than this. So essentially, if not because of the involvement of approving contract, which creates its own inefficiency. This kind of arrangement gives a lot of latitude and leverage to the operator to actually provide its expertise and finance to actually run the venture most optimally. So if there are issues of less optimal production in this venture, is simply because participation of government can also slow down activities. And it's for good reason that government needs to participate, because you also ensure that operators are compliant to the rules, are compliant to their contract, are compliant to the laws of the country. But those are the kind of flip side you have where government also participates through the NNPC. Let's go to the next slide. I don't know, I'm not doing very well with time, so I need to move faster. I think what I tried to talk about next, maybe I will just try to fly through them if the network will permit us to move faster. Essentially now I said, so what are the leverages? Essentially, you see the value is created here, essentially is the amount of produce, the price is sold, the cost you spent in order to produce it. So the production is within our capacity to influence. So we have a leverage there. The cost is within our capacity, is within our gift to influence. So we can do something there. But the price is what it is in the market. We can't change it. And that's why you can see that even royalty is based on whatever price you get. It's subject to a lot of influence in there. So how can we, what kind of leverage, how can we improve where we have the gift, our own gift to improve, to influence? I said, so production is a function of how much you invest. You have to invest to look for the oil. You have to invest to develop and produce it. So, and by nature of oil is always in the decline. If you drill an oil well today, it start doing 10,000 barrels per day. If you leave it over time, it will be going down because the natural energy driving the oil is also going down as you're producing the oil. So it continues to decline. Therefore, if you want to continue to produce even from the same reservoir, you have to do something around either drilling a new well or actually doing something around that well in order to continue to boost production. So investment is constant. Therefore, if you want investment to continue to flow, what government can do is to also ensure that there are cars that is attractive to investor, that prove to them you can get your returns on investment. And there has to also be a stable polity and predictability in the outcome, which is one of the key issues around Nigeria. There is so much uncertainty, so much unpredictability that investors are not always at home to bring in their money because they are not sure they will have enough time in order to recoup their investment. Then once you're in production, what matters is your operation excellence, your technical competence to do the right thing, and then your financial muscle to continue to provide the money for operation. And then least but more important is compliance. You have to comply to all the regulation, to the country laws, to international obligations, whether they are in process safety, whether they are in financial obligation that may have been given by financiers. Compliance is key, because if you don't comply, chances are that you lose your license and then the whole business back up. So the two most important things once you're in operation is your technical competence, is your financial muscle to continue to fund, but it's also your ability to comply to all the set down rules and regulations. Then lastly, but not the least, in terms of factors that affect production, is that you also have a secure and stable environment. Security is key, and it's one of the big issues that we have today in Nigeria, that there is no security of the infrastructure, there is no security for people to go in there and produce the oil. Harmony in the community is key. Over the last 20 or 25 years, you can see that we have lost that with all the agitation. Things are a bit cool now, but it has never been cool since we lost our innocence in 1998 with the declaration and what do you call it? I can't remember the town where you had the declaration. Things have never been the same again. So those elements are very important for us to continue to maximize our ability to produce. Next slide again. Next slide talks about cost. So again, what can we influence in terms of cost? What are those things that contribute to cost? Cost is essentially our CapEx, which is the capital investment that we made to build new things. Is the OpEx, which is the operational cost, what we need to spend in order to continue to produce. And it's also other associated fees and levies that government impose on the industry that also impact on your cost. So on the CapEx, you know that Nigeria has is known for high premium in terms of capital cost. Our execution risk in Nigeria is significantly high. And therefore, easily, a base price for doing work else easily multiplies by up to 50%, perhaps even more, simply because of the risk of execution in Nigeria. So we have high premium cost that impact of our capital cost. And then we have execution inefficiency. We are low in infrastructure. We don't have roads. In most cases, what you can actually do by taking car, you have to fly helicopters. What you can do by taking ships, you have to fly helicopters. We don't have road. If you have to drill a well, you have to build your own road. If you have a facility, you have to produce your own power. So all this means that adds to our ability to essentially execute. And also the what you produce, the permits that you need to get, a variety of things. The host community issues, if you don't have stable relationship, it impacts on the execution. So execution efficiency. Easily in Nigeria, a project in the world in Nigeria, that also impact our ability to maximize our contracting process. Because we've been seeing that over the last 10 years. It takes easily 3 years from initiating a contract to an award. So imagine when you have to execute a project where you need to act rapidly in order to take advantage of market in Nigeria, but to award a contract, a big contract, takes 3 years to award. So whatever opportunity you want to catch would have left you even before the contract is awarded. So we have that significantly as an issue, and it's as a result of, I said, participation by government. Before you can award a contract, you have to go to NNPC for approval at every stage. You have local content authorities that also have to approve your step at every stage. You have the regulator who has to approve your step at every stage. All of this add to inefficiency, and indeed also, like I said, eventually contribute to the premium cost. Of course, that's I talk about the onerous local content, whereby the law expects you to source everything in Nigeria significantly, including manufactured goods manufactured out of steel. And we don't have any viable steel factory in Nigeria. And yet you're expected to buy line pipes from Nigeria. You're expected to buy pumps and compressors from Nigeria, and there are no vendors. And that's what they expect to do. And as a result of having to negotiate how to get you out of that, it to the cost of the project. Then in terms of operational costs, we have been in operation over 50 years. Significant part of our production assets are aged. They are almost at the end of their design life. And the cost of keeping them maintenance is always significantly challenged, because operational cost is one of the least costs that you really want to spend if you want to become an option operator. So we are always optimizing. We are not spending the right amount of money to maintain our assets. So those assets are old and they continue to degrade, and they continue to cost us more to maintain. For infrastructure, I mentioned that around how there is no infrastructure in the country that can support an operator to do things much more efficiently. And of course, the lack of security has also meant that we spend significant amount of money providing security, either for operation or for projects. On top of that, there are fees and levies. The government has found the oil industry as the golden fleece. Every new activity, government want to get money from source, from industry. So you have the NDDC, for example, 3% of operational budget. You have educational tax that goes to the baseline. You have the local content fund that also you paid out of every contract you award. Now the PIA, you have the HOSCOM, you have the police function fund, police funding also. A variety of things now that National Assembly, every new agency they create, the first thing they want to do is that they will say the funding will come X% of operational costs from industry. What that means, what that does is that it increases significantly our cost even before we produce, and impact the viability and the competitiveness of our project. The impact on the bottom line when we want to take investment decisions, and you add up all these costs, it makes this cost to rank very low. In a world where you have to compete with other businesses, a lot of projects in Nigeria don't compete right at the corporate headquarters of our multinationals, and therefore Nigeria. So what then happens is that the cake that we bake through this industry continue to get less and less, because no investment is coming. The small cake that government wants to take continue to live through this kind of cost. And then, of course, we talk about multiple regulatory fees. Even after paying this, when you have a project to do, you're likely to look for 1,000 permits and licenses in order to execute a project. And every application is accompanied by payment of money. So you have all this adding up to the cost of your activity, and therefore degrade from the value that you can deliver from the industry. The cake that we bake from this industry continue to get less and less. And overall, if you look at it, actually government get less as a result of all these factors. Next, please. Okay, so our slide movement is a bit challenge. Okay, so what we have currently today, our generation capacity, the industry can generate up to about 50 billion a year, out of which 20 billion goes to government. The remaining goes to the variety of issues I discussed. Of course, it's 7% of the GDP that we discussed. There is an opportunity today based on known projects that are in funnel that could actually take FID that government can easily add a revenue of 3 to 4 billion on top of what we are currently collecting if we can make the environment amenable. And certainly with the PIA, with a much more focused implementation, we can also do better with our host community going forward. Next slide, please. So now I need to move faster to the recommendations and issues. Next slide. Yeah.
You want to skip the production decline?
Okay, so but it's not showing. So essentially, what you see in the next slide, part of the issues affecting
No,
the.
can I clarify if everyone can actually see the slide? Apart from
I can't see it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay, I think I have. Looks like I have network issues. So let me.
You have
to...
delayed. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me change my network, please. Okay. So the production decline essentially shows that currently we are declining at almost 33% per year. That is significantly higher than what is a natural decline. That is, if you just drill your wells, you don't do anything, it by anywhere up to maybe 5%. But currently we are declining at almost 33%, which means if we don't do anything about our investment, and essentially because we are not investing to produce more, and then the little potential that we have, we are not able to produce as a result of the variety of issues I mentioned. So as a result of that, we are losing out as a nation. We are not able to arrest this decline. And you could see that projection going forward from 2023 going forward, and this is data from the OPTS, the industry association. Even when we are able to do the project that we have in the funnel today, we will still be declining at a very fast rate. So which means we need to do much more. The potential is there, 37 billion barrels. If we are to produce 2 million barrels every day, it will take us 50 years to produce that. So if we are happy to only keep our production at 1.7 per day, we are the one at a loss. There is significant value that we can bring out of the ground if we can make the environment amenable and can actually reduce this decline rate, almost the natural decline of no more than perhaps 2%. In that case, we can keep a plateau of almost 2 million barrels per day with significant value take for the government. Next slide, please. Next slide is also showing, so again, a typical snapshot of, this is a typical snapshot of a 10-year production profile from a company. You can see the of the profile. This is not how a production profile should look. A production profile should actually be on the upward increase, or at best flat, remain flat. So every year you say I'm producing 2 million barrels, you will produce it. But you can imagine now how this jigsaw, how this hacksaw profile is from 2006 to 2015, where production goes up and down. And I can tell you it's as a result of events that are outside of the control of the operator, either vandalization or theft or major events that are outside the control. So when you cannot predict what happens next year, there is no way in the big corporate boards that we have internationally, people can be comfortable in taking investment decisions. And you can now see that if this is the reality in Nigeria, where people cannot predict what will happen next year, there is no wonder then why IOCs are leaving, especially the mature onshore basin, where ability to produce consistently has been challenged consistently. And also what you also see from this slide is this is oil and gas production profile, all going up and down together, is to show the integrated nature that when we build our infrastructure for oil and gas, they are interrelated. You cannot produce the gas independent of the oil, simply because the gas also comes with liquids. And the liquids that come there, you want to connect it to the oil system. So every time your oil system is down, your gas system is down. And therefore, it makes it significantly difficult to go forward, whether for oil or for gas. And it's also explained the reason why I say today the LNG is also suffering from gas supply, simply because the oil supply, oil production is challenged. Next slide, please.
Before we go to the next slide, please, I would like to create your indulgence that we may need to extend this session by 15 minutes because we are quickly running out of time. You have only 5 minutes left in the normal time. So, and I'll also ask the guest speaker to probably see how we can manage a little time so that we can have time for questions and answers.
Okay,
session.
Let's quickly run through the next slide, please. I hope the network will be kind enough. Next slide. So again, another challenge, these are macro factors around the world that affects our industry, the energy transition, the world is talking about climate change, We're looking for energy efficient, low carbon emission. So all the IOCs board are looking for, and they're actually under pressure from their shareholders because of ESG concern that they must produce low emission. But unfortunately, with our basin in Nigeria, based on the fact that our assets are old, you need to significantly change them in order to produce low carbon emission. And the vandalization that comes with theft, the illegal refining, the amount of spills, and the amount of emission into the environment is way beyond what can allow a company to operate within the limits of carbon emission expected with the ESG requirement. So it's another one big reason why IOCs are leaving, because there is no way they can continue to produce in Nigeria and be able to demonstrate that they can produce within the kind of lower carbon emission and the targets set commitment they have made under the COP, that they can continue to operate at low carbon emissions. So what is one of the big issue that is happening globally that is also impacting our industry. And then you also have new basins that are opening up. Across the West Africa, for example, now there is hardly any nation that doesn't have oil and gas. Across the Gulf of Guinea, almost all nations are having. And since they are new, they are able to offer better fiscals, they are able to offer better operating environment. So that also means we are less competitive. So essentially, despite that we have gone through reform with PIA, sanctioning a project in Nigeria is increasingly becoming difficult in IOC board simply because we don't rank very well on many factors. Next slide. So again, this just tried to encapsulate the state of the environment, the issue that I have described in many ways, political, economic, regulatory. I don't need to go through them, but maybe the slide can be read later on and you see that. So it's essentially to say that the environment is still not friendly for investment. And this is an example when I say there are plethora of fees that government charges the industry in order to operate. This is an example. Look at all the list of agencies, and all of these agencies are charging you fees as a result of operation. This significantly add to the cost. This significantly add to efficiency of execution and operation, and it all add to the problem of the industry. Next slide, please. So again, I just go through the slide, just go through the next 3 slides. It's just an example of oil theft, how it is impacting on the asset, increasing our inability to produce, adding to the environmental issues, and essentially has been a very protracted one over the last 10 years. Despite all the best efforts, the NNPC appointed contractors have tried to improve somewhere in the Western Delta, but the issues still remain. We need to do it, so we need to look at it holistically. And the NNPC, I know this is a little bit provocative when I say NNPC and albatross, and I'm just listening to kind of conversation that is happening around the world. Is NNPC a solution or a problem? Now, when you look at the NNPC Act of the old, or even the provision in the PIA, I think the NNPC has been saddled with a lot of responsibility, especially when you talk about this security, ensuring energy security for the nation. If you look at these provisions on the PIA, anywhere you talk about security in Nigeria, you know, is a problem. Yeah, it gives a lot of discretion. And therefore, a lot of things happen that you cannot explain. Whether it is security votes by state governors or ability, or what NNPC does in order to ensure availability of energy in the nation. A lot of things that happen there are not transparent, are part of the problem, and are also at the root of the issue NNPC being cash strapped all of the time. There are issues of corporate governance. I know that the current management are trying a lot to institute new, but because there is poor accountability, where things go wrong, no one is held to account. You can look at it around a lot of the commitment the NNPC has made, whether it's in bringing back refineries. There have been many promises in the public that have not been delivered, whether it's in executing vital gas projects, whether it's the OB3 gas pipeline, the AKK gas pipeline, indeed, developing gas projects that will fill those pipelines, developing gas projects that will fill LNG. I can tell you that LNG Trans 7 is today above 70% complete in terms of execution, but there's no one single upstream project FID that has been taken that will supply gas that project. This will be the first time that an LNG train is being built without upstream gas supply FID has been taken. Yeah, right. So these are all part of it. And then the issue of lethargy, which I think is just that because there's no accountability, the NNPC play in their comfort zone. If things go wrong, nobody is held to account. So things just continue to deteriorate as it is. So for me, recommendation, I think what I say at the top is that we need to look at homegrown solution. IOCs are moving on. IOCs are profit driven. IOCs are driven by other factors, shareholder concerns, that no matter how we want them, they are moving on. They want to divest from the onshore for a variety of reasons I mentioned. We still have an opportunity to keep them here for gas development. Some of them are interested. We still have an opportunity to keep them for deep water. So we need to provide that enabling environment and trust for them to be there. But we need to, where they say they want to go, encourage them to go. Allow the indigenous oil producers, which I call the I with a small I, to take over. We need to, so in the short term, security issues need to be addressed. And I think NNPC need to really operate as an independent commercial entity. You need to take out the political interests that continue to hammer or the pondering that continue to affect the operation. We need to rebuild our trust with our traditional investors. You cannot think of bringing any new investor in Nigeria when the investors that you have over 50 years are leaving. So we need to build that trust and keep them so that new ones can come. And I think one of the fundamental things I want to recommend is also we look at our indigenous oil producers and create a specific incentive and affirmative action that I would say that will help them to transit into taking over the onshore assets and to help them to actually find the necessary funding and build their capacity to take over the industry. We don't have any option than that because IOCs are not going to help us doing that. In the medium to long term, it's all about predictable and stable investment environment. It's all about government. Participation of government by and large, it's more of an obstacle than a plus. So we need to get government out so that private investors can come and bring the private investor kind of mindset in how business are run. So next slide again, I just try to drill down a little bit on this recommendation. I talk about what can we do for security. I think we need to engage with the community. We need to be more honest. We need to give them share of the satisfy their need for participation, but also address their development needs. And we have the HostCom funding that can be enabled by PIA that we can leverage on that. We need accountability. One of the big problems in Nigeria is the impunity, whereby there is no enforcement or rule of law. You cannot depend on getting justice either from government agencies or from the court itself. So accountability is lacking. We need to address that as a nation. Use of technology is important. We can use that for hydrocarbon accounting. We can use that for surveillance in terms of security. Now, one of the things that the regulator wanted to do was to be the one in charge of installing meters. That is quite inefficient. I think what the regulator needs to do is to provide guideline and specification and hold operators account. Thou must operate with specific kind of metering and you must report. The regulator can hold audit rights and ensure that things are done. But to say that the regulator will be awarding contracts for metering, it models up the issue, create interface that makes operation completely inefficient. Like I said, funding has to be addressed. So as we begin to release NNPC from this political hold, from this accountability of providing PMS, hopefully their cash flow will improve and they will be able to fund their own GB share without any hassles. And like I said, for the IOCs, I think government need to do something different to support them. So on NNPC, these are my little recommendations. They're not any out of what has been there. Corporate governance, reduce the government tech. I said address this issue of national energy security. How can we do it without letting NNPC go? And then we have to also divorce NNPC from policy formulation. There are regulators that should be doing that. NNPC should just operate as a commercial entity. Next slide. So recommendation for sustaining IOC is a variety of issues. I don't have to go through that. There are operational issues that need to be addressed. There are fiscal concerns. Still, the PIA doesn't support investment in deep water and gas. So I think the government is already doing that through some executive orders. And I think through perhaps even legislation that will come to make that even better. Affirmative action for the indigenous oil company. I think, like I said, we need to support the current investment. Let it just happen. And let's find a way to support our own to make it work. Investment in the longer run, we talk about all this I mentioned. I think the only thing that I wanted to say is we need to simplify regulation. We have far too many regulators charging fees, adding to the inefficiency. We need to simplify that. We need to focus on growing the cake so that we can have a bigger share of revenue, rather than small takes through fees and levies that doesn't add anything but problem. And then, of course, we need to provide technology that help low carbon emissions. That's the only way we can continue to attract funding for the industry. So whether it's a small indigenous company or the IOC, we have to find a way to incentivize the use of technology, carbon capture, and all of those new technologies that help in reducing carbon emission and that will allow financiers to actually invest or provide money for investment. Next slide. So conclusion, I think I done it also said is about restoration, our ability to produce, and then we need to grow, we need to address those issues. But I think my last word, what I want to say is the greater part of the problem is not lack of policy or lack of regulation. It's about implementing what we say we'll implement. And I say people are key into how we implement it. And the current level of corruption and impunity on the country makes it completely impossible to hold anyone to account. So I think for me, we need national orientation. We need to address our recruitment process, how we bring people, whether in polity or in civil service or in companies. And lastly, we are people of God here. We all are very godly people, whether in mosque or in churches. I think we need to imbue the fear of God in people, the culture of service and level of humanity, and forget about self and materialism. And I think we need to do that so that we can change our narrative. And I think it takes everyone. This for me is the most important. If we don't change ourselves, people, if we don't involve new culture, no matter what policies, what thing we do, will never deliver us to that. And on that note, I say thank you very much and sorry for taking too much of your time.
Thank you so much, Engineer Bashir. It's a very wide topic, and we all recognize that. And I can't imagine how you actually be able to fit it within even the time you've used so far. What we're going to do is that we'll take a few questions for about 5 minutes, allow our staff to actually give us a last of time. And I'll probably take one key recommendation. This is people. It's about people. It's about us. It's about Nigerians. Because I've been all over the world. The success of every company sits with the people. The success of the country sits with the people. Be it Brazil, be it Qatar, be it the UK, be it anywhere in the world, Denmark, name it. Where I've been, Kazakhstan, it is all about the people. And it's about people being trustworthy and then being conscientious and then being responsible for their success of their own country. In fact, if you ask anybody in Qatar, they will tell you about Qatarization if you ever been there. And if you've been in Oman, you will hear about organization also, whereby they want to put their people in the key places so that they can monitor and progress the country. So that is the key. If we have it, we will be successful in Nigeria, because Nigerians are all the world the most brilliant, the most respected when it comes to education and everything, engineering, name it. So we can actually make it work. So I will open the floor now for a question. I have Engineer Hashim Bakori. Please go ahead.
Okay, good evening all. I think I have a contribution in metering. I had the presenter mentioning the regulator being involved in metering. I want to maybe contribute that the regulator should concern himself with the metering code, issue out a metering code to the market participants or the industry players, such that there will be an independent body that will be in charge of the trading meters, while the accounting meters for the producers should be controlled by themselves. And at the end of the production period, be it 1 week or 1 month, they reconcile their figures. And these meters must be visible. I mean, they should be automated. That is the, peer group mechanism that I would say the sector should concern itself with, for example, the electricity sector. There's no how you leave regulator to be metering the pipelines, or the producers of the crude to be metering what they produce, and also you will not expect some discrepancies or disputes at the end of the day. Perhaps part of the recommendation of this paper may look up to this. Thank you.
So, thank you so much. We have at least one more question before we go to SecGen. Please bear with me. If you have further question, please put it in the YouTube forum. It will be open for questions, and I believe our speaker will be able to respond to that, because I think we are running out of time now, because we have only 4 minutes left. So I will take Engineer Yemi Shuara.
Thank you very much, the presenter. Thank you very much. My question is, you did mention how important the oil and gas production is to our foreign exchange earning and all that. With the recent decision by NNPC to sell oil to indigenous refineries in Naira and all that, that will obviously have some impact on our foreign exchange earnings. I'm just wondering what's your views will be on the impact of that on the availability of foreign exchange for other businesses, and also the subsequent impact on the exchange rate, the economy, and all that. And how could that really be cushioned if the impact is going to be adverse? Thank you.
So quickly, what I would say to that, I think what I did say in my lecture is that we have formed dependency on oil as a foreign exchange. And the truth of the matter is that we have since realized that we need to diversify. We need to find other sources of earning. And I think this irony of selling to local refinery in Naira is also a way to stabilize the price of the Naira. And it has to be, because whether we sell in Naira or we sell the crude in dollars and import it back, the impact is the same. Truth is that we need to diversify. We need to use the revenue from oil, whether it's Naira and dollar, to expand other sources of the economy where we can earn revenue. So if, for example, as a result of this, we can provide an environment for agriculture to grow, we can become a net food exporter and we can earn revenue. So it has to give and take. Yes, we will have to spend this foreign revenue now for our immediate need for energy, but we can clearly not continue to depend on oil and gas for export earning. We need to diversify economy. We need to use the revenue from oil to get out of oil by creating other opportunity to earn revenue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now call on Alhaji Musa Rabiu, Dr. Musa Rabiu, to give us a vote of thanks, and we'll close the session. But as I said, the session is still open on YouTube, whereby you can actually make comments, and I believe our host, and as well as our guest speaker can respond to some of your questions as we can probably move off this forum. Thank you so much. So let me give the room for Engineer Dr. Musa Rabiu to give us a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Engineer Dimeji Sikiru. Please, could you stop sharing? This has been a very fantastic session. We have a very vibrant participation from within Nigeria and across the continents, North America, Europe, so which is very good. PEEF has always held such sessions in the past. This year we have had 4 sessions already of this virtual talk, basically focused on key sectors of the economy. So if you look at the screen, I'm just sharing now, you will see the areas we have covered so far this year. We started with the steel sector. We focused on the Ajaokuta steel industry. We presented a report, our recommendations to the Minister for Steel Development early this year, last year. We also focused on the agricultural sector in terms of food security. Again, we had an expert that led that discussion. Next, we focus on the state of insecurity in the country. Again, we had a former director of DSS as the guest speaker. And before today, we had Professor Sagagi, a former advisor to the President, Buhari, on economic affairs, who led a discussion on the review of the federal government 2024 spending plan. And of course, the oil and gas is our focus in October. And this is the first leg of it, looking at the upstream sector, which Engineer Bashir Bello has excellently facilitated. So we're very grateful. We do not have time, but certainly there are many takeaways. What we normally do is to fine-tune the presentation into a recommendation document that we then share with policy makers and other stakeholders. So we will work with Engineer Bashir Tuku to make that happen. It is also important to say that we also invite other subject matter experts, because I can see there's quite a number of them on this call, to be available when we approach them next year. I know Engineer Bashir said he wonders why the chairman of BOT, perhaps a numero uno in terms of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria, is not leading this talk. We're going to approach him and let him know when he will avail us of his time and knowledge so that we can create a special PEEF virtual talk session for him next year. We have, of course, gotten a commitment from Alhaji Mashood Yusuf that he's going to lead us in a session next year. So we are gearing up to that. And there are others also that I can see on this call, Dr. Williams, Abiola Yusuf, Taji Shobayo, Emisha. There are many of them from oil and gas. We are not restricted to any sector. We look at all sectors where we can focus on the human capital development for effective national development. So we will also encourage those who have attended this session to be willing to join the PEEF knowledge sharing platform. It's a WhatsApp group, it's very vibrant. There are some that I could straight away say I will add to the platform if there are no objections. But if you are interested, please let me know. I've sent email to all of you, so you have my email address. Also, the slide presentation slide pack will be shared via email to all those who have attended this session. Our next big program, apart from the focus on the midstream, downstream on the 24th of October, will be our PEEF Annual National Conference, the 8th PEEF Annual National Conference on the 21st of November this year. We'll be communicating that formally in due course. So on this note, I would like to thank everybody from our BOT chairman to all our distinguished members and stakeholders who have been at this call, particularly to the guest speaker, Engr Bashir Tuku, and of course, Engineer Dimeji Sikiru, who is joining us all the way from the UK. We thank you so very much and wish you a very good evening wherever you are. Thank you so much. Now, what I would like us to do is also to take a screenshot. So if we all just put on our video camera, yeah, so we can take a screenshot for the record.
Some of us are not in our best attire.
Yeah, okay, you can decide whether you are presenting or not. Let's see as many as we can take for the records. Okay. Yeah, I have it. Just a moment, let me repeat this. Okay, thank you so much, and have a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Alhaji. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.